Welcome to our video series on applying for a Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant. This is the second video in our series, and these are documents that all applicants must submit. So all these items are required of all applications. So resources, as you look at the requirements and information, can be available through web grants and the application guide. But your Recreation Resources Service consultants are available to provide assistance when preparing the application. So keep that in mind. Also, that we receive many applications every year, and in order to provide a thorough review of your application, we ask that it be turned in to review at least 6 weeks prior to the application deadline. This also gives you, as an applicant, a window of time to remedy any issues identified in your application package, during which potential issues can be addressed. So as we go to review these, let's take a look. So our requirement and resources focus on web grants and the application guide that includes resources to assist you in preparing a competitive application. Your RRS regional consultant will provide guidance and review any questions you may have, so please discuss your grant proposal with them. Also keep in mind they're reviewing many applications, so please work with them to meet the review deadlines. Our goal is the same as yours. We want you to submit a quality application. So our reviews will look at items that may be ineligible, so we want to make sure everything that you put in your budget and your grant are eligible for PARTF. And we'll also make recommendations for improving your justification and or site plan as you prepare to communicate what you're proposing to do to the Parks and Recreation Authority. So web grants and the application guide, once you create your account on web grants, you can log in, you will see funding opportunities, and you can go to the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant, and then click on attachments, and that will show you where guidance for web grants, but also the application guide that's typically fillable for the current year. So we recommend you get that, and within that guide you will see these resources that we'll be talking about for environmental and regulatory information. On the checklist, there's certain things you want to make sure that you have, so you have it eligible. So you want to enter information in web grants, but you'll also be uploading some files. So there's some things that you'll do that you'll need to upload documentation. The required elements are application information, project information, application information, we'll talk about that. That's who the local contacts are. Project, what you're proposing to do. Certification by a local governing board, and a project description and justification. Then there'll be optional attachments as you prepare and complete the scoring system. So some of the highlights for the resources are access. All planned facilities must comply with the Americans with Disability Act accessibility guidelines. This is required by law, but also required by PARTF, and will be when you sign the application and in contracts that are signed. So we want to make sure that you plan for that. Are you proposing for playgrounds? We strongly suggest that applicants review the Public Playground Safety Handbook published by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. And you should consider purchasing playground equipment and surfacing that meets the latest American Society for Testing Materials, or ASTM, standards for public playgrounds. These provide resources should you ensure that what you've planned in your projects comply with the ADA, and include those cost of access routes to the accessible facilities in the grant application. All of those connections are eligible. So do you have above ground utilities? Keep in mind that any utilities that are funded with PARTF must be placed underground. But if you have existing lines, overhead lines in your park, and you want to bury those, that is an eligible expense. It's not a cheap expense, but it is something that is an eligible cost if that's something you want to work into your grant. Native plants, landscaping for PARTF funded projects must only use seeds and plants classified by the U.S. Department of Agriculture as native to the southeastern United States. That will be, those resources will be in the application guide. And then the environmental review, and we'll go over that in a little more detail, but those are resources to help you understand potential permit needs and protection of natural and cultural resources on your site. So a few tips for your application. As you're setting it up in Web Grants, we do want you to keep the application title simple. Be sure to use the park or trail name in the title, and the title needs to be consistently used throughout the application. If you have multiple people working on the application, the local government contact, first of all, the local government contact person must be an employee of the sponsoring government, the applicant. All communication, if you're awarded, will go to this individual. If you have multiple people working on the application, that primary contact might add additional users. They can go ahead and create an account in Web Grants, and then you can add them to the application. Sometimes we have consultants or someone from the Council of Governments that might be working with several towns. They can be attached to those applications in Web Grants and be able to submit on behalf of each one. The project information, make sure you include the street address and the latitude and longitude of the project site. You also need to list any grant numbers, so for previous funded projects for PARTF or for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, or LWCF. And your RRS consultant can help you with that, as we have a grant locator map to determine what sites were previously funded in your jurisdiction. Mentioned before the application approval and certification. This is from the local governing board, and it must be completed for your application to be eligible. Confirm your application has been approved by the local governing board. Ensure it is signed and dated by the government's chief elected official. So it cannot be the Park and Recreation Director or the city manager. It must be the chief elected official who signs this, verifying that it has been approved by the local governing board to apply and commit the funds that are required. If two local governments are applying, again, we talked about that joint application, both local governments must sign a document and upload it. The project description and justification are very important. This, combined with the site plan, are the key documents that the Park Authority sees when they're making their decisions to select grant awards. The description wish you to be concise, 3 to 5 sentences. List and describe the recreation facilities to be added or renovated, as well as any land to be acquired with this part of assistance. So don't be general. Some folks are very general, like, oh, we're going to add things for children in our parks. You know, tell them that you're putting in a playground, a nature play area. We're building trails. Be specific. The justification is where lies your opportunity to present the project significant and describe why it is needed in the community. Uses where you want to tell the Park Authority why your project should be funded over anybody else's, because we have a lot of great projects submitted. So this is where you want to stand out. Communicating the need is a vital component of your application. So some of this is describing how will the project impact your community. Why is PARTF assistance needed to complete this project? And then quantify that impact of the proposed project to your community. And we'll talk about that a little more, but clearly expressing the positive outcomes of creating new recreational opportunities to the authority is crucial when you consider the competitiveness of this program. The authority will not know unless you tell them the story. And we don't tell them the story. That is for you to do as you present this information to the Park Authority. One of the items that is key is the site plan. So this serves as a visual presentation to communicate the proposed project to the authority. It should align with the description and justification. So when they're reading that one-page justification, they can see your site plan and understand what you're proposing to build or construct. Are you doing acquisition only? In that case, you just illustrate the proposed future development in orange. The are set colors in the PARTF application to use in the legend and as you color code this site plan. Please use those colors. When you use something different, again, that's a distraction. The Park Authority is trying to determine what you're proposing to do. If you're not following the guidelines on this, they might not understand your project, but they would understand that you were not following the instructions that were provided. So please follow that color scheme. If you're doing a greenway or a linear park, review the example that's in the application guide. It's important to illustrate connectedness, especially at road crossings. So work with your recreation consultant from RRS on that, and they can help you make sure, okay, this is understandable. These might be some other ways to present that map. Glad to help give you feedback on that. If you're doing a building, so on this left-hand map, this was a project where they're doing a education center, so it's just a big green block because that's the building. They were doing a few other things as well. You need to submit a floor plan. So in this case, this building, which was an old house, they show first floor and basement plans, and in each area it shows the different recreation facilities. So there's outdoor recreation classroom over here, recreation, nature displays. So those are 3 different recreation opportunities in one building. So you're showing those items on the floor plan to help the Park Authority and help us understand as we're reviewing it. Project costs. You need to list all project elements that you propose for funding and the estimated cost of each element. Everything that's shown in the project costs must be shown on the site plan. So again, you're showing those facilities. So within web grants, there is a table where you submit these things. All elements, again, must be shown on the site plan. And it's important that project costs submitted in the application, they become part of the budget, or that part of the budget and in the contract. So your project contract includes these. So again, when we talked about all elements of picnic shelter, think big picture. Picnic shelter, playground. You don't need to list every little structure on the playground, but you're putting in a playground. We know that includes surfacing. So put that as one line item. Ball field, with irrigation, dugouts, fencing. Accessible routes, make sure you include those. Parking lot is support facilities, site prep, and utilities. A lot of times those are separate just because they're a little bit different cost. So all of these items, these project elements, will be your total project cost. Then some tips. We suggest, again, we had that year difference between when you're preparing this and when you might even actually start on the project. So you might want to add 25% to each project to account for that inflation. Consider accessibility. So when you're calculating construction cost, are you putting everything that you need in there? So in this case, you have a walking trail 6 feet wide with one bench. Does that bench, are you including a concrete pad for companion seating off the main trail adjacent to that bench? Make sure to remember to include those things. Land acquisition. Even if it's being donated or sold at a discount, or you have a waiver to purchase, you need to include the cost of the land acquisition. The donated value is, in this case, $73,000. That is what you would put in your budget. Then contingency should not exceed 5% of the project element subtotal. So remember, our project elements were $740,000, so that is your contingency. You do not include land acquisition expenses on that. And we'll ask you to double check to make sure it is 5% or $50,000, whichever is less. Sometimes you might have a much larger budget and 5% is high, but if you can't go over $50,000 on that. And please do include contingency in your budget. Planning cost, they may occur. They're the only thing that may occur prior to the contract period, but you need to include them in the budget if you want it to be eligible. They should not exceed 20% of the project elements. Again, that's the project element cost. We're not talking about the contingency shouldn't already be added or land, just this cost. The subtotal of that or $200,000, whichever is less. There are a cap on contingency and planning cost, and that's primarily because the Park Authority, the admin rules want most of the money to go towards building facilities. PARTF funds may be used to purchase land, build, or renovate facilities. So think infrastructure, sports equipment, bats, balls, tools, maintenance equipment, office equipment, indoor furniture. Those are not eligible expenses. And if you submit them, they will be removed from your budget. All items funded must be permanently secured. There are exceptions. So there are some typically portable items for outdoor facilities, such as soccer goals, picnic tables, bleachers. They must remain at the project site, but we know they will be moved around depending on the activities taking place in your park. You also need to include the source of matching funds. This demonstrates the local government's capacity to fund the project. The table in web grants includes the name, description of funding, the amount of funds, and the projected availability. Be sure to indicate the type of funding. Is it cash, a grant, land donation, and the source? Sometimes you may have another grant that you're using. Has it been awarded at this time, or is it pending approval? Applicants are not required to provide proof that the town or county will receive the funding from all sources listed in this table, but PARTF uses this information to learn how you might provide a matching share. Keep in mind that funded applications are required to complete their project as described in the contract within a 3-year period, regardless of the source of the local government's matching funds and whether they come through or not. And PARTF does allow other state funds or federal funding to be used as your local match. Thank you. This concludes our second video for all the documentation required of all applicants.